Hello, I'm Dr. Robert Young, and I have the great pleasure to be in the company of a wonderful person and a wonderful doctor who many of you may know or may not know, but I'd like to introduce her. Her name is Dr. Ariana Love, and I think she's definitely living up to her name. And I think that's she's got air in her name. She's got love in her name, and those are very important things for life. Air and love. If you don't have oxygen, I don't know. I think you don't last very long. And love, I would say, probably less than 3 or 4 seconds. So they're all very, very important. But anyway, she can introduce herself here in a minute, but she's a naturopathic practitioner doctor, and she was telling me the other day her father, so she's following in her father's footsteps, and so I thought that was really, really cool that he was a doctor in natural remedies and procedures. So anyway, what Dr. Love, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself briefly here?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Young. Yeah, I'm following my father's footsteps. He's Dr. Eric Love, and he has the International Association of Homeopathy. He pioneered naturopathic medicine since before I was born. He was working in the field. So this is very unique. You know, in America, there were no institutions at the time where you could get certified or trained in naturopathic medicine. So I began studying with him very young, and he opened these doors to me. He would take me camping and opened the door to natural medicines and healing and what it really means and how the body works and the fact that we're not just this body, but we're a soul. So from a very young age, I didn't trust Big Pharma, not because of my dad, just because of my own intuition. And I never would step foot in a hospital. And I would read the ingredients on absolutely everything. And I was well aware that governments could not be trusted and that they were poisoning us. So this was from very small, like about 5 years old. So I lived always in an alternate reality to everybody else, maybe more in the reality. So for the past, 12 years, since 2011, so fast forwarding. Okay, I studied with my dad, studied in his institution for years, studied in another institution, and got certified in a bunch of different things. But my father, he focuses more on the emotional healing and trauma, which I do too. But I find that I have to spend all of my time focusing with people on teaching them how to take care of their physical health, that I don't even get time to go into the spiritual. Not yet, anyway, especially in this crisis that we're in. So in the 2011, I got into journalism. I took a pilgrimage to Palestine, and I lived in the occupied Palestinian territories with the Palestinian people in a small village in the West Bank. It was in the foothills of occupied Jerusalem. And I was studying Palestinian culture. I was studying the olive oil. I was studying apartheid, Israeli occupation, Zionism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And from its roots and the Abrahamic tradition. So that was very eye-opening. I was there for a year, and this absolutely changed my life. And from there, I started getting into journalism, and I was always a good writer, and always I was invited by the Liberty Beacon to start writing for them, and I did, and I loved the interaction with the audience and how I could influence people with information positively. And so Dr. Roger Landry, he's a lawyer, but he trained me in media, the Liberty Beacon. I built one website for them from the ground up. I built a couple websites. So I've been on the front lines in independent media since 2011. I started in citizens reporting because of the Palestinian plight. I was working with Well, I mean, they are the ones who pioneered citizens reporting, because there was no Western media would lie and favor the Israeli state because they own the media. So I just sort of was filling in the gap and working with the people, Palestinian people and the Palestinian media professionals to report the truth. And this is what got me targeted. But anyway, that's another story. So for the last, since 2011, I've been on the front lines in independent media. I've taken on political prisoner cases like, high profile people like Julian Assange, and I helped WikiLeaks out for a while. And then recently, in the last 2 years, I've been reporting on the this democide, basically, by the COVID-19 injections, and this biological assault against humanity. Read the patents on all of these vaccines, and to understand the technology that's being used. And for the last 8-9 months, I've been trialing natural medicines that to find a way to detoxify this weapon system, I call it, from the body. So sorry if that was a little bit long, but
No, it's a lot. It's important to know, and it's interesting because when you talk about your father, my father was a great influence in my life, a man of integrity, and I never could figure out why we never had any health insurance, why we never had any life insurance, why we never went to the doctors. Everybody else was having checkups or getting vaccinations, and we never experienced any of that. And the first time I ever experienced going to the doctor as a Boy Scout, I was putting up a tent, and I was using a hatchet, and I used the blunt end of the hatchet to hammer in the stakes to hold the tent in, and I brought the blade end up and I sliced my leg, actually the knee. And it was such a severe injury that I needed to have stitches. Well, reluctantly, my father and my mother took me to the hospital, and he says, "Stay here, I'm going in, okay? I'll be right back." So he went in, and he walked out, he says, "We're going home." And I was shocked. It says, "We're gonna have to figure this out on our own." So he taped me up, and it's interesting because I had that scar for so many years, but it's now gone. And it's amazing how the body will actually repair itself if you provide the proper environment. But, I asked my father, I said, "Dad, what was the state of affairs, during your life as it relates to vaccines?" Because he went through several pandemics, the polio pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, "What do you think about that?" And he said, "I learned early when I was in World War II, and when they were giving out vaccines, and I said, no, I'm not, because I saw everybody getting sick after they had the inoculation. And I said, I wasn't going to have any part of that. And none of his children, I come from a family of 6, none of his of the family have ever, that I know of, at least for me, I can speak for myself, ever went to a hospital other than that one time, ever was inoculated. And so we kind of refrain from any of that type of thing. And I won't get into some of the disparaging words he would use, but the bottom line is that was impregnated on my mind. And so I was destined to evolve, into what I'm doing now. But my interest was not in virology. It was in biology and microbiology. I trained in Germany, and I'm grateful for that. I mean that I was led to there and studied under Dr. Marie Blecher, who was the protege of Dr. Gunther Enderlin, and he was influenced by Dr. Claude Bernard, but he was mainly influenced by Antoine Béchamp. But I didn't know that. I mean, those names never came up. I mean, he was talking about pleomorphism and the ability of the body to transform, and bacteria, how it was born in us and from us. And so that's kind of my background, and I'm grateful for it. But you mentioned naturopathy, and you know, I don't think a lot of people really consider the fact that a certification, which is different than a licensing, was just not available. It wasn't available. In fact, California is just one of the few states that even allowed the certification and licensing. And when I was looking for a school that I could go to, this was in the 80s in the United States, it did not exist. There wasn't a school for naturopathy practitioners or holistic. It was all alternative out there, alternative education. So it wasn't, you could get certified. You could be certified by that institution. And I later found a group out of Birmingham, Alabama. I don't know if you've heard of them. The American School of Natural Healing and the Clayton School of Natural Healing. But they were the only ones that provided certification, and was the only one at the time that was actually, I want to say, registered with the state in education, and was accredited. In fact, they're not even in business anymore because they can't afford the expensive filing fees, which are in the millions of dollars to stay accredited. And so they finally had to close up shop. But I don't know, did you find that to be the case when you were trying to find, you know, a school of education that would teach naturopathy or, you know, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I struggled with that. I mean, I went to, Hartwood Institute of the Healing Art School, and I studied every modality that was available at the time. What was that, 1990, 1990, wait a minute, no, that was in film school. Anyway, it was years ago. And, you know, I was interested, I studied all different kinds of things, but when I wanted to go to a university, I started by looking for a nutritional program, and there wasn't a single one. They were all like dietary for corporations and large mass productions of food, or working in a school or in some sort of a hospital setting. They weren't for actual health and healing. It was a regimented sort of like big pharma education. That was all that was available. And I was so frustrated, and I was thinking, how am I ever going to learn nutrition? So I ended up working with nutrition companies, and I had to teach myself along the way. And I remember when the first naturopathic institutions were erected, and they were in California, and they had kind of odd, strange programs. They slowly developed, and it spread across the country, spread across the world. But I mean, it was, when I was a child, it didn't exist. So my dad was really like pioneering the field, and I had to do the same thing. I had to teach myself. And I have friends who went to naturopathic schools, institutions, and they're certified. And they said it was a big waste of time, that they still have to teach themselves. So, that's what I did. I don't wait. For me, I don't wait. Like if I want something, if I want information or need information, I'm not going to wait for there to be a program for it. I'm just going to find that information myself. That's how I am. And so I did. And I sort of like trudged my own path as a doctor. And I never really I never planned on practicing, because I'm well aware that, to be accepted basically in the international community, you have to have accolades, and you've got to go through the education system and the higher education. And I was prepared to do that. I just couldn't find a program. that would teach me what I needed to know. I was genuinely committed to healing. So but during this, what do you call it, this pandemic, I recognized that I'm needed on two fronts: in journalism, with my research skills, and in natural medicine with what I know about natural medicine. So I just jumped in and started figuring it out, and started a practice by helping people, and became one of the first doctors worldwide to actually detoxify people from this technology. And a lot of the Western medical doctors, they have been stuck or trained and stuck in what I call virus land. And it's very hard for them to break free from that. I mean, they are now, because they have to, because we're learning a great deal about how we've been lied to now that big pharma has played its hand and exposed themselves, and so everybody's learning here, everybody's changing, and I see us going back towards naturopathic medicine, which was completely edited out of our history. Before the Rockefellers, before big pharma, before the Rockefellers founded the allopathic medicine, everyone was using naturopathic medicine worldwide. It got snuffed out. It got black PR'd. They took over and took control, and psyop with a big psyop, and there's a lot of lies in allopathic medicine, and one of the biggest ones is that they tell people that there are terminal diseases. Nothing is terminal. You can absolutely heal the body from anything, and I knew this as a kid because my dad was doing it.
Well, the background behind you is so beautiful, and as I look at that, I think of how beautiful that is because of the environment in which it exists in, and that the health of that beautiful lake, the trees and the mountains, is in relationship to its environment. And that was a metaphor that I used in my book called The pH Miracle Revised and Updated, and which has been distributed in different languages around the world. That book had a metaphor with a simple etiology, and that is, it started out with a question: if the fish is sick, what would you do? Would you treat the fish, or would you change the water? And so the logical answer is the fish is only as healthy as the water it's swimming in. Therefore, if you change the water, you'll heal the fish. And that was really the premise of my whole theme, that the human body is only as healthy as the fluids in which surround every cell that makes up every organ, every gland, and every tissue. And so when I had the opportunity to study under Marie Blecker, who taught me not only bright field phase contrast and dark field microscopy, but also electron microscopy. And so I learned a lot about that, and I'm so grateful to have been able to study on that, because when we start looking at the blood, which is the single most important organ of the body, for life is not in the blood, but is the blood. And I don't know if you know this, Ariana, but when a sperm fertilizes an egg, a drop of blood appears. And from that drop of blood, an entire body is born. Life begins at conception. And so the fertilization of that blood is where life begins. And so without the blood, or the health of the blood, then there is imbalances. And when we talk about disease, I don't like to think of specific diseases. In fact, I've often said there are no specific diseases. There's only specific dis-ease symptomologies or conditions. Mm-hmm. So what is being labeled as disease is not truth. It's a symptom of something else. And in order to understand the something else, you have to understand the context of that or the environment of that. That's why I call myself a medical or a biological environmentalist, an internal environmentalist who has studied the environment now for close to 40 years, looking at the blood. And something I think is really important for people to see is an article that you prepared just recently that was showing some of the artifacts or the symptomologies that actually are alarming and that are created out of a polluted environment, So if it's okay with you, can I go ahead and show that article, and maybe you could talk a little bit about it? I'll go ahead and do a screen, a share screen here. And I want to, yeah, I think this is what we're looking at here. Okay, and I want to bring attention, I don't know if you can see that or not, but I want to bring attention to the title of that, transhumanist, and I'd like you to describe that. And these nanowires of graphene or reduced graphene that also may have other nanotechnology attached to it, like gold or titanium or aluminum or silicon. But these are nanowire tortures, the vaxxed and scaffold new tissues. So why don't you just share for a minute this article as it relates to what was found inside the blood vessels. I believe it was the blood vessels of those who had died after vaccination, and these were the autopsies that were done and what was found inside their blood vessels.
Sure. Well, there's an embalmer, Richard Hirschman, that was pulling these white, stringy, long, fibrous things out of people's blood vessels, corpses, dead corpses who were vaccinated. And, you know, it's not natural, obviously, it doesn't belong in the body. And so I did some research and I found that it is actually tissue scaffolding. What they're doing is they're able to build new tissue inside the human body. And in this case, this type of white stringy thing, it is an artificial blood vessel, basically. Now, this technology was developed, it was developed to be used as a treatment for, you know, healing the body, but it's obviously being misused. And that's what's clogging people's blood vessels and causing them to die. So this is it's artificial polymer material, and they can grow it inside of humans, and they have been doing it. I think they developed it since 2005. Got a bunch of links there for people to study. Now, these two pictures, these are off the internet. They're from articles linked into this blog. And there you go. That's an artificial blood vessel. And it looks very much like what the embalmers are pulling out of vaccinated people, vaccinated corpses. So if you scroll down a little bit more, here go back up a little bit. Yeah, I just want to cover this with the material that it's made out of right here, not the images, the actual writing. So those artificial blood vessels are polyester polymers. But these are the 5 different, they're synthetic and natural polymers that are being used to tissue scaffold inside the body. So you have a polyester, which is the most commonly used, and I think it's the white stringy things that are clogging people's blood vessels. And that is biodegradable. It will biodegrade in the body eventually. And it looks like that's what they're using predominantly. Now, but there's also a silk fibrin which comes from insects and worms. They literally take it from insects and worms. So it's the DNA of another species being grown inside the body because it's very strong. And that's what these images probably are. I mean, I'm not an expert in this field, but that's what it might be. It's what it looks like to me, that this image that looks like tree bark or something. They use collagen and then hyaluronic acid and chitosan. These are the different fibrous tissue, artificial tissues that they use to tissue scaffold. And they can build a whole organ. They can build an entire new heart. They can build a liver. They are actually tissue scaffolding inside the brain. Because I continued research after this blog and I found more things. They can build an entirely artificial brain inside of a human. They can turn a human into a cyborg. They can turn somebody into, synthetic biology, into a controllable type of a robot. It's part human, part artificial. And this is what they appear to be trying to do. And then within these structures were found these nanowires. Mike Adams examined these samples under the microscope on InfoWars, and he dyed those with, I think it was iodine. So that's what the golden color is. But that very well could be a gold nanowire or a copper one. But I think that they would be using gold and something else. I can't remember now. If you could scroll.
Maybe I could add to that a little bit as it relates to the wire on the scaffolding. The graphene, reduced graphene, is structured in a way that you can attach, either 1, 2, or 3 different types of nanoparticulates. And one of they're using is gold in the identification of various degenerative conditions such as cancer in specific areas of the body. So they are using graphene oxide, reduced graphene with gold nano particulates for the identification of cancer, and also the delivery. They're using graphene also for the delivery of various medicines or treatments to specific areas of the body, and that's where the modified RNA, which is specific to whatever organ that they're choosing, that genetic material be specific to that target. So if the target area was the ovaries, they would use genetic matter from the ovaries to drive the contents of what they wanted to deliver there. That's actually then, in a capsid that contains the medicine that could be then delivered to specific areas of the body. So that the purpose of the RNA is to drive specific particulates, they could be good or bad, to specific areas of the body. And that's why we're seeing these types of particulates in the brain or in the heart or in the ovaries or the gonads, because they're driven by specific genetic material. So the wires, and I'll show you in a different picture, the wires, let's see if I can show you that. Whoops, not that one. Let's go back here. Well, I was thinking it was right there. Why don't you go ahead and I'll talk about the wires later, but why don't you go ahead and finish about the nanowires?
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell a little bit more about those. Nanowires are used for tissue scaffolding. They can contain payloads. They can contain things that the tissue needs, like, for example, for the tissue to grow. So it needs oxygen and it needs nutrients. And they use the stem cells from babies and human babies and the umbilical blood. They use that. So I mean, this I think explains the the stem cell harvesting that's going on in Ukraine. So to get this tissue to grow inside the body, so the nanowires they can release as needed by external command, actually, in the body, what it needs to grow this artificial tissue. And the nanowires actually grow in with the tissue, so it stays in there. And they're little antennas. They're receivers and transmitters. They basically can be remotely controlled. And I believe this is what is torturing vaccinated people. They are feeling the electrical activity in their body, especially in their head, and it keeps them awake. They can't sleep. Every single person who came to me who's vaccinated, they tell me they cannot sleep because there's too much electrical activity in their body. So the nanowires could explain that. It's literally torturing them. And to add to what you said about the gold, they're also using gold nanoparticles to do electroporation, which is basically to puncture the cells of, it make holes in them to enable nanoparticles to get inside. Because they're using a myriad of different types of nanoparticles for different purposes. Some of them are larger, and so I found that they're doing this electroporation, and they use electroporation for transfection, the gold nanoparticles. So yes, they're using many different kinds of metals. These nanowires are also made from copper, they're made from gold, they're made from copper, and I think one other metal. It's in my blog, I can't remember at the moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're using aluminum, they're also using titanium.